Hey YouTube, it's Eric. This video is going to be pretty quick. I'm just going to be showing you some documentation I found that alludes to Vladimir Ledochowski, who was the general of the Jesuits during the Second World War leading up to it. I'm making this video because there's a video by the channel Willow Groma that's done on a good video on Vladimir Ledochowski. And as the Black Pope during World War II, he was ultimately the man that was behind the Iron Curtain that was pulling the strings. Just like during World War I, like for example, the Hegelian dialectic of the Jesuits and the Vatican were playing both sides. On the hand of Germany, you had the Kaiser Wilhelm II, who wrote in his memoirs that the Pope told the Kaiser that Germany was to become the sword of the Catholic Church. And on the other hand, who's leading the supreme Allied force during World War I? It's none other than Jesuit-trained devout Catholic Ferdinand Foch, who actually had a Jesuit priest as his older brother. And Heinrich Himmler modeled his SS off the Jesuits. Aber-Manhattan documents one case in particularly in 1950. There was a case where 5 successive high-ranking United States generals went to see the Pope. Pope Pius XII had 2 Jesuit confessors, and ultimately Ledochowski, was overseeing Pius XII, who was Hitler's Pope. But I'm going to show you some interesting documentation I found. One was from an OSS source that was declassified. I'll go through that first. This was declassified. This is page 2 here. Yeah, this was declassified in what doesn't say the declassification date. I think it was declassified in 2007, but this document is from 1947. See, there's some parts of it that are redacted still that they don't want. They don't want people to see. We see this specific. This is Japanese espionage in the Reich. You're going to see, according to this OSS document, Vladimir Ledochowski was affiliating with fascist Japanese at the German embassy. You'll see this right here. So this is where Ledochowski starts here at Bulletin 7. Here, I'll zoom this in. This is from an OSS source. Actually, it says right here, declassified and released by the Central Intelligence Agency, Nazi War Crimes Act. Okay, so it is 2007. This came out. But look at this here. So read this bullet point here. At the beginning of March 1941, the Italian CE informed us that Kawahara, presently in Berlin, was the former Secretary General of the Japanese Embassy in Rome, where he had his frequent meetings with Vladimir Ledochowski, a Jesuit engineer. I found the full name of this Kawahara. I couldn't find a photo of him, but he was the Secretary General of the Japanese Embassy in Rome, and he was meeting secretly with the Jesuit General. Okay, you see, this Jesuit General carried on an illegal. Look at this. This Jesuit General carried on an illegal correspondence with the Polish resistance movement in Wilno by means of the Japanese diplomatic courier. And actually, you know what? The Jesuit priest Joseph Rettinger was directly involved in this Polish resistance movement. Presiding the Polish government that relocated to England, because this was all in accordance to the Jesuit Ledochowski's plan to create a quote-unquote holy Habsburg Roman Empire in Europe. It even says, I linked it on Ledochowski's Wikipedia page. Ledochowski was I think he served in the Habsburg court as a youth even. So he was very connected to the Habsburg monarchy. You see it, but look at this. This Jesuit general carried on an illegal correspondence with the Polish resistance movement in Wilno by means of the Japanese diplomatic courier from the Rome embassy to the Berlin embassy. According to the Italian CE, Ledochowski has received and transmitted several times important military information on Germany. I repeat. According to the Italian CE, Ledochowski has received and transmitted several times important military information on Germany. Just the video, I just remember, that's probably why G. Gordon Liddy wrote in his autobiography, Will, on page 36, that Heinrich Himmler modeled the Schutzstaffel in the Übermenschen, his SS, off of the Jesuit order. You see here, Ledochowski is getting briefed on very important military information on Nazi Germany through according to the OSS in this case, through the Kawahara at the Japanese embassy in Rome. And I found another source for this. This was in a footnote here from the book that I found this on Google Books. This is called Ultranationalism and German-Japanese Relations, 1930-1945. by John Chapman. You see this. I found this on a footnote here, footnote 26. He mentions Kawahara. His full name was Kawahara Sunichiro. He was making direct connection to the Jesuits here. And you'll see Walter Schellenberg said that he was the real political observer representing Tokyo. So Kawahara Shuchiniro was like representing, the Japanese deep state. And that's why he's meeting the Jesuit general very clearly. We see here Italian information was forwarded to the Gestapo in March 1941 and included the information that the Jesuits in Rome were receiving military information from German and Soviet-occupied Poland and forwarding it to First Secretary Kawahara Sunichiro in the Japanese embassy in Rome, who relayed it to the Third Secretary of the Japanese embassy in Berlin, Furuichi Hiro. So this other the Japanese embassy, another secretary of the Japanese embassy in Berlin, Furuichi Hiro, was in contact with the Jesuits. But he says here, Kawahara was subsequently moved to Berlin and was noted by Walter Schellenberg, and Edmund Paris quotes Walter Schellenberg in his book, The Secret History of the The Secret History of the Jesuits. That Walter Schellenberg literally says that Heinrich Himmler literally modeled his SS off of the Jesuit order. He just, as G. Gordon Liddy said, that Heinrich Himmler modeled his SS off the Jesuit order. You see Walter Schellenberg, Kawahara was noted by Walter Schellenberg as, quote, an impenetrable and difficult man who is the real political observer representing Tokyo. I repeat, Walter Schellenberg said that Kawahara Sunichiro was an impenetrable and difficult man who was the real political observer representing Tokyo. While Furuichi was soon afterwards moved to Bangkok in 1941 and ended the war, as head of Department 4 of the Gamishio in Tokyo, he retired from the diplomatic service, serving as the ambassador in Indonesia, and stood unsuccessfully in 1966 for the upper house of the Japanese Diet. Well, that's funny. So he's serving in Indonesia when the CIA coup to put in General Sukarno took place in the 60s, which had Reinhard Gehlen was working to take out, or in that coup to put Sukarno in Indonesia. Or they took out Sukarno, they put in Suharto. So I get the two names sound the same, but Sukarno was taken out. General Suharto, the dictator, was put into Indonesia. But you see here, the Jesuits were, you see a recurring theme with Ledochowski. He was very fascist. You see here, he was meeting with Kawahara Shuchiniro, no doubt a Japanese fascist, at the Roman Japanese embassy in Rome, and it's in OSS documentation. The next thing I want to show you is from David Kurtzer's book, The Popes Against the Jews. I found a PDF version of this online. I had to transfer it from an EPUB, so it's still a good. It came out good, but I'd link that in the description. Let me see. There's lost the page here. Give me a second. I have the footnote I want to read, but I just have to find the page. I'll get a picture of Ledochowski up here. And Ledochowski related to Mieczysław Ledochowski. He was the cardinal priest primate of Poland. He died in 1902. He was also the prefect of the Congregation of the Faith, which I'm pretty sure that's what the Inquisition merged into. Let me see here. Okay, Ledochowski anti-Semitic. Okay, 235. Okay, that's the page. Okay, give me a second here. Okay, so this is actually, I'll screen share here because there's a photo of Ledochowski. I have my physical copy of David Kurtzer, The Popes and the Jews, with me right now. Okay, here's my physical copy right here. There's a photo of Ledochowski on page 234. You see there's Vladimir Ledochowski, Superior General of the Jesuits. Actually, this the text, not that the footnotes aren't mentioned on Wikipedia, but the text here is referenced on the Wikipedia page of Ledochowski's. So I recommend you go through his Wikipedia page. But this is what Kurtzer says here on page 235. Let me get the photo back up here. Yeah, it says here the Jesuit leader had made no secret of his enthusiasm for the fascist regime. Okay, let me repeat that. The Jesuit leader had made no secret of his enthusiasm for the fascist regime. From time to time, when Mussolini came to power, he had done what he could to stamp out the church opposition to the deuce. Okay, and that's probably why Mussolini had a Jesuit priest as his confessor, Father Taci Venturi. Okay, but I'm just going to read the footnote to that line that Kurtzer wrote there. He says here in the footnote on page 436 or 462, recall that Ledochowski had made his displeasure known to the Civica Cattolica editor Enrico Rosa in October 1922 when Rosa had written an article attacking fascism. In the summer of 1929, in the immediate aftermath of the Lateran Accords, when the Pope was upset with Mussolini, the Jesuit general was again angry at Rosa for encouraging the Pope's criticism. So Ledochowski was shielding Mussolini. Okay, but according to a secret police report, Ledochowski, sent Rosa off to a church congress in Spain in an effort to get him out of the way and allow time for the Pope to cool down. And then Kurtzer gives his source here. Okay, continuing here from the book. At their meeting in early 1936, the Italian ambassador told Ledochowski that Mussolini wanted America, that's the Jesuit magazine. The Italian ambassador told Ledochowski that Mussolini wanted America's anti-fascist editor and a pro-fascist editor put in his place. Okay, continuing, Ledochowski accommodated him readily. Quote, the Father General immediately, without hesitation, Pignatti wrote, quote, gave me the head of the director of the North American Jesuit magazine, end quote. Soon a new editor was in place, suitably enthusiastic about the fascist cause. Okay, and here's the source Kurtzer gives. The man who was fired at Mussolini's request was Wilfred Parsons, S.J. Interestingly, Wilfred Parsons, S.J. was affiliated with the Pro-Dio movement as early as 1942, and Wilfred Parsons, S.J. was one of the Jesuit-trained Joseph Ignatius Breen's personal friends. Joseph Breen was the chairman of the Production Code Administration. In the book on Joseph Breen, that it's called Hollywood Censor. It's in my it's in my archive feed. You can see a photo of Wilfred Parsons with Joseph Breen. But the guy they fired Parsons. He had been the editor of the Jesuit Weekly for 11 years. He was a bitter foe of Charles Coughlin. Again, that's a dialectical opposition to Charles Coughlin. But interesting here, Parsons was replaced by Francis Talbot, S.J. And then if you read Peter J. Doiswick's book, in the New York Post in 1930, Francis Talbot, the source for this is Peter J. Doiswick's book, Catholic Victory in 1960. He sources the Jesuit priest Francis X. Talbot, like a decent sized quote saying that Protestantism is like dead and finished in America. I'm paraphrasing, but that's like the gist of what Francis Talbot said. Francis Talbot was on the board of the Legion of Decency and became the chair of America magazine. But it says here Talbot was a Charles Coughlin supporter and a fascist booster. Okay, going back to the text here. So gratified by the support, Pignatti remarked that Italy's enemies were the church's enemies. Ledochowski agreed. The attacks on Mussolini for waging war in Ethiopia, he replied, were simply, quote, a pretext from which international Judaism is profiting in order to his advance on Western civilization. I'm going to repeat because you're going to see that even the idea of a Rothschild conspiracy theory comes from the highest authority within the Jesuit order. Okay, so that's why you see when Dr. Rodney Howard Brown, writes it, goes on, he gives 3-hour talks, but not without mentioning the Jesuit order or the Vatican once, and he'll spend hours talking about how the Rothschilds are controlling this international money conspiracy with the British, with Cecil Rhodes, who literally says that he modeled his secret society, the Society of the Round Table, off of the Jesuits. You see that this is why all the shills pin the Rothschilds for who's in control. You're gonna see I'm gonna read you from the footnotes that Władimir Ledochowski was promoting the Rothschild conspiracy theory, because he knows that in the Rothschilds are the bankers of the Vatican. That's why it says in the Jewish Encyclopedia, the Rothschilds are the guardians of the papal treasure. Of course, Ledochowski knows this. Okay, but continuing here, the attacks. So I'm just repeating that. So the attacks on Mussolini for waging his war in Ethiopia, which was a complete war of aggression, the Jesuit replied, were simply, quote, a pretext from which international Judaism is profiting in order to advance its attack on Western civilization, end quote. And here's the footnote for that. Okay. This is page 462 back on the footnote. Ledochowski went on to warn that Anthony Eden, the British foreign minister, was, quote, in the hands of the Jews and especially in those of the Rothschilds, end quote. I repeat, Ledochowski went on to warn that Anthony Eden, the British foreign minister, was, quote, in the hands of the Jews and especially in those of the Rothschilds, end quote. Herzer gives his source. A report of this, a copy of the same report signed by Pignatti is found at, and he lists capitals ASMAE ASPSS, page 30. That's in the Vatican archives. Okay, following the opening ceremony for the World Catholic Press Exposition in the Vatican on May 12th, 1936, Pignatti ran into Ledochowski, who was delighted because in his remarks the Pope had stressed the communist threat. Quote, Father Ledochowski, reported Pignatti, quote, sees Judaism allied with Bolshevism to be the origin of all current evils and a great danger to our civilization, end quote. So there's so that's direct proof that the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories is coming from literally the highest authority within the Jesuit order, the Black Pope, the Superior General. Okay. And throughout this book here, the Pope, David Kurtzer's book, The Pope and Mussolini, there's all kinds of documentation from I'll show you a picture here. Mussolini's confessor was a Jesuit priest, just like Pope Pius XII. This is Mussolini's confessor here, Father Taci Venturi. I think there's a photo of him on his Wikipedia. Oh, no, there isn't. This year he served, quote, as an unofficial liaison between Mussolini, the fascist leader, and the Popes Pius XI and Pius XII. Okay, I'll give you a photo here. And Pietro Taci Venturi was also in the Order of the St. Martinus and Lazarus, as was J.P. Morgan and Myron Taylor, for example. Here's a photo of him. And there's all sorts of quotes in this book saying that Venturi was promoting a international Jewish conspiracy. Let me see if I can find just one quick here. I'll go to the footnotes. It's been a while since I've read this book. Bought it like a year and a half ago. Let's see here. Okay, Taci Venturi Conspiracy Theories, page 225. I'm just going to show you a context. Like, he was just like Ledochowski. He was saying that Judaism is like the root of all of our problems in the world. 225, 226. Okay, so this is on page 225. I'm just gonna read the section here. As Italy became increasingly isolated, conspiracy theories gained new momentum. Not least among them was the Protestant Jewish Masonic communist plot that many in the church had long decried. And this is just like how all the fascist organizations, like the fascist Catholic Mexican synarchists, preached that it was the Protestant Jewish Masonic communist plutocracy that was out to get us. It was the same message that was preached by Charles Coughlin, fascist Christian Front. Same message was preached by the Hitler Youth in Germany. The same message was preached to the young Eustachis in Croatia. The same message was preached to the young fascist Spanish Falange in Spain. All the fascist movement, the same message was preached to the fascist Romanian Iron Guard, for instance. So all the fascist organizations took to this Protestant Jewish Masonic communist plot. But continuing to Kurtzer, so this is page 225. In early November, the Archbishop of Amphilie sent a circular to his priests with a message to share with parishioners in their Sunday sermons. Quote, the League of Nations is acting under the influence of occult forces, end quote. He went on to list them, quote, Freemasonry, Bolshevism, and Anglicanism, end quote. And this is why you see like disinformation agents like Rodney Howard-Browne blame these exact same groups, okay, because he's a Jesuit propagandist. But continuing, they were fighting Italy because they could not tolerate the sight of the fascist regime living in, quote, in perfect collaboration with the Catholic Church, end quote. Okay, so it says here, British and French denunciations of the war angered the deuce, and he feared the impact that economic situations might have. This offered a new opening for Taci Venturi. You see a photo of him on the screen, Mussolini's Jesuit confessor. So this offered a new opening for Taci Venturi, who had been pushing his conspiracy theories on the deuce for years. On November 30th, the Jesuit arrived at the Palazzo Veneza sent by Pius to discuss hopes for an early end to the war. He quickly turned to the subject most on his mind. Quote, this is from the Jesuit. Has Your Excellency read the articles Who Wants the War behind the Ethiopian affair in the November 16th and 30th issues of the French journal Le Revenu Hermedad or Hemobadair? I probably pronounced that wrong. It's a French journal. Quote, yes, I am familiar with them. And back to the Jesuit here. Quote, then you've seen how the anonymous author clearly demonstrates that Freemasonry tied to the communists and Bolsheviks has constructed a united front with the goal of trying to bring about the end of fascism of Mussolini and bringing about the revolution in Italy. It is a revolution that considers not wrongly the indispensable means of installing a Bolshevik empire in Italy. So you see, he's saying he's accusing the Jews and the Freemasons of trying to set up a Bolshevik regime in Italy. So like it's essentially the identical propaganda to Charles Coughlin. And I put a PS documentary on Charles Coughlin on my channel that you should watch if you haven't seen that yet. But back to Taci Venturi. This is Kurtz here. Before Mussolini could reply, Taci Venturi completed the picture. So this is back to Taci Venturi. Quote, believe me, Excellency, we are dealing with a terrible trap plotted with the complicity of the League of Nations, which is under the domination of the Jews and the Masons. Okay, end quote. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that the rhetoric, all this rhetoric of a Jewish Masonic conspiracy theory comes from literally the highest authorities within the Catholic Church. And according to OSS documentation, Ledochowski was like an avowed fascist. Okay? He was meeting with the Japanese ambassador in Rome, or the Secretary General of the Japanese Embassy in Rome, Kawahara. And his full name is Kawahara Sunichiro. And with this information, it just kind of validates what Willow Gromall said in this video here. This is a good video. It's called Vladimir Ledochowski, SJ, and Jesuit Communism. Ledochowski was ultimately the guy that was, pulling all the strings in World War II. And actually, here's some more documentation I want to show you quick. This is just, you can read, I put these on the my archive.org library. It's called The Memoirs of an Eminence Grise, The Memoirs of Joseph Rettinger. And Rettinger briefly talks about meeting with Ledochowski, and he says actually where he met Ledochowski in Zurich, Switzerland. And he said it was like a very dark and scary place where he met him. I thought that was interesting. But this is just from an article here that I linked in the description called A Spy, Patriot, or Internationalist. It's like an article on Joseph Rettinger. But it says here, Rettinger, however, had a double-track approach, and the lay Jesuit Joseph Rettinger was the main ideological architect behind the Bilderberg Group, and it's even on the Bilderberg website that Joseph Rettinger, if you type in Joseph Rettinger Bilderberg, it says that Joseph Rettinger was commissioned by General Ledochowski to create a one world government. He actually says that, and to resurrect the Habsburg monarchy. That's even on the Bilderberg's own website. I made a post on the Rome Rules subreddit with that block of text in it. So it's all out in the open. But I'm just showing you here. It says Rettinger, however, had a double-track approach to the Habsburgs. His guardian, Count Zamowski, this is an interesting character here, but his guardian, Count Zamowski, had arranged a meeting in Switzerland between Rettinger and the Black Pope, the General of the Society of Jesus, Vladimir Count Ledochowski, a fellow Pole. This linkage is significant because Ledochowski was suspected by French intelligence of being a linchpin in the Vatican's efforts at a pro-Central Powers diplomatic let me see here. So this linkage is significant because Ledochowski was suspected by French intelligence of being the linchpin of the Vatican's efforts at pro-Central Powers diplomatic efforts. A late 1915 report concerning Ledochowski accused him of, quote, animating a vast pacifist organization financed by Berlin and Vienna, which disposes many millions of francs and directs numerous Austrian, German, and Swiss agents, end quote. That's according to French intelligence. It says here that, but continuing, Ledochowski discouraged. So in the book, it actually so apparently This was all like a front, but Rettinger says that Ledochowski says that Rettinger's plans to create the empire were thwarted by Nazi Germany. But Rettinger actually says in his memoirs that the Jesuit gave him his full backing. There's just another quote I want to show you here. This is from the Kaiser. And you can read, like, this is quoted in Behind the Dictators, Leo Lehman, The Vatican Policy in Second World War by Leo Lehman, Clerical Fascism in the United States by J.J. Murphy. But there's a quote from the Kaiser's memoirs where the Kaiser literally says, the Pope told me that Germany was become the sword of the Catholic Church during the First World War. But this is a quote. It says here, the Kaiser regarded the Jesuit general rather differently, the center of a Catholic, Austrian, and possibly Polish plot to ruin Germany. That's how the Kaiser viewed the Jesuit general, which is interesting. Like Ledochowski, like the head, like the people in the government, like it's the old saying, it's harder to deceive governments than it is to deceive people. So the Kaiser was fully aware of the nefarious nature of the Black Pope Ledochowski. But it says here in early 1918, the Kaiser wrote, quote, the whole unsavory Parma robe Habsburg campaign of agitation is represented, inspired, and directed by the Jesuit Count Ledochowski, end quote. And that was in the book here by Fritz Fischer, Germany's Aims in the First World War, published in 1967. So I haven't heard of that. So I'm going to try to scope out this book now because that's a fascinating quote. But you see, Ledochowski was very fascist. And if you haven't watched this video here by Willow Gromov, I recommend you do that because everything that he says in that is backed up by documentation when you search for it. Let me see if anyone's in the chat here. Yeah, how's it going? Actually, hey Jeremy, hey SS. Just a really good article you guys should read if you guys haven't read this yet. This is like explosive information on how the Catholic Church and the Vatican brought Adolf Hitler to power. I'll direct you to this right here. This was written by Dr. James J. Murphy, who was a Catholic priest, but he converted and then became an editor at Leo H. Lehman's magazine, the Converted Catholic magazine. But I found this article was reprinted by this Canadian Protestant Gospel Witness and Protestant Advocate. It's called "How the Catholic Church Helped Hitler to Power." It's fascinating. It's fairly short, 6 pages, but it's like it's in columns. So if you read this here, you see it gets this is very explosive, short to the point. You see the Catholic Church, no doubt, got behind Hitler. He says here, for example, this Nazi here, Karl Haushofer, a Catholic professor of the University of Munich, is the originator of geopolitics and the creator of Hitler's plans for world conquest. Joseph Goebbels was Jesuit trained. He says Joseph Goebbels, creator of Hitler's propaganda machine from the outset of the movement, lists himself in the German who's who as a Roman Catholic. Haydn, page 285, says of Joseph Goebbels, quote, he had studied art and philosophy at 6 universities, had lived on scholarship from the Catholic Albertus Magnus Society, end quote. So there's many connections in this little article here to the Nazis and the Catholic Church. I don't want this video to run on too long. And I don't want to spoil it for you if you haven't read it, but it's very good information. But I think I got to wrap it up here, guys. I got the lady friends calling me, so I got to get going. But that's all for this one. Peace and love, and Nam Nas.